breaststroke coach? I mean, there's no one even close to you in terms of who's the greatest ever in breaststroke coaching. So why that particular stroke? And teach me about it, because if you won the award for the greatest ever, I win the award for the worst ever. So it's like, teach me breaststroke, but why that one in particular?
Well, first, I'm flattered you would think I was one of the greatest coaches ever. I've been a very successful coach, and I'm really proud of that. But I've got my own failings, but I appreciate that.
Oh, listen, there's no doubt. Look at your resume. Come on, there's not many people with your resume at all. But in terms of breaststroke, it's a whole nother level.
Well, I tell everybody the reason I've been successful with the breaststroke is because I was a breaststroke swimmer, and so I can still remember what it felt like when I made my first junior nationals, probably my last junior nationals too, is long course Santa Clara International Champion meet, and I'm doing the turn of breaststroke. I entered the meet illegally because I didn't have the qualifying time. My coach asked me when I made this time. I was looking at the psych sheet and said, "When did you do this time?" I said, "Well, I've never done it." He says, "Well, you better make this time, because if you don't do it, you're going to be fined $100. And back in 77, 76, that's $100 meant a lot. And I, like you just said, I was a little under the weather. I caught a cold, probably because I was stressed out about it. And I remember coming off that last turn and coming off the underwater pull down and poking my head up above the water and looking 50 meters down the way and going, "Oh my God, I'm going to be fined $100. And I in fact touched the wall, made my first junior nationals, and I didn't have to pay a fine. But that was my, I know breaststroke because I swam breaststroke, and I still to this day remember what that feels like. And even though stroke has changed to the extent that it has over the last 30, 40 years, I still have that sense of what that is, what it's like. So it's given me an understanding, appreciation for the stroke. I tell breaststrokers, you as coaches, you've all had breaststrokers come in and to practice, and they're complaining that the stroke doesn't feel right, it doesn't feel good. It's like, I don't know what happened. It felt great yesterday. And I remember what that's like, because you come in and all of a sudden your stroke doesn't feel right. It feels awkward. And because I experienced that, I know how to get the kids back into the stroke that's right for them, because it's a timing issue. And I've learned a lot from just watching swimmers. I have my specific designs on what it should look like. And there's key components to the breaststroke that I think are key to successful breaststroke swimming. But at the same time, I recognize that if you watch the finals of the Olympics, 8 swimmers, you'll have 8 different looks to what the stroke looks like. And you gotta, as a coach, I think you look at the key components. I look for what does the body look like at the completion of an extension, and I want to see what that looks like. And it's a line. It should be a line from the fingertips all the way through the head down to the feet. And there's things I look for in terms of recovery. I don't believe in recovering over the surface of the water, and I believe that you recover and you turn the hands and the elbows into the extension. So there's key things that I look for: the elbow position on the in sweep. And so there's those key positions, and then I look at the connection between the upper body and the hips and shoulder, or the hips and the legs. And so I understand how those things all work together. So it allows me to kind of refine the training for breaststrokers that's really specific to them. But I share what that feels like, and it helps a lot. And the other strokes I think are pretty simple compared to breaststroke. But having that feeling, what it was based on being an athlete in that particular event, helps me a lot with breaststroke. And then again, like I said, recognizing that the way Jessica Hardy, Amanda Beard, Staceyana Stitz, Rebecca Sony, they're all so different. And one of my workouts with Rebecca Sony, we're going a long course workout. This is early on my first year with her. And I do a lot of drill type work at race pace. And she stops about 15 meters from the wall, and she's just in tears and crying. And she looks at me, and she's our best swimmer on the team. And she looks at me and she goes, "I hate your drills." Oh my God, my best swimmer is going to quit and leave. And I pulled her aside and I said, "Rebecca, I understand your stroke, and I'm not going to have you swim like Amanda or Jessica or Staciana. I'm going to swim you your stroke, and I understand your stroke, and I'll get better at understanding your stroke. And there's some key things to your stroke that I think we can enhance versus take away from. So I'm not going to change your stroke, because she knew her stroke was different. And I said, look, I know breaststroke, and you're just going to have to trust me. And if you can trust me, then you'll be okay. And that kind of calmed her down for a while, and it got us through that first year. So you've got to understand the nuance of the stroke, that it can be so different. You can have, and it's so dependent upon flexibility of shoulders, the hips, the ankles, the knees, and what you're able to do with those athletes different. But there are some key components that I always look for with each athlete, but I also take into account the differences that they have. One of my proudest moments, I think, was a short course world championship several years back, when I had 3 of my breaststrokers go first, second, third in the 50-meter breaststroke, and that's happened to be, one was Yulia Efimova from Russia, and then Jessica Hardy and Rebecca Soni. And it was kind of cool because every one of them was very different. Just to have those different stroke mechanics be that successful was kind of a proud moment.
Yeah, interesting. A lot of stuff to unpack there too in terms of the key components. I want to touch on those because I think that's interesting. But the thing that you said in terms of the feel, I feel the same way about freestyle. I just can feel whenever somebody's in the water and they tell me something or I see something, I can feel what they're feeling and I can relate it really easy. So freestyle comes very, very natural to me. I do think it's a simpler stroke, but breaststroke seems so complex to me. But there are obviously key components to it. So just touch on some other key components. You talked about the line. The line is obviously necessary to get back into it as fast as possible, I would guess.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the key components.
Well, again, like I said, I kind of, my starting point is looking what the body looks like at the end of a complete stroke cycle. And I'm looking, I want everything lined up. So that's one of the key components I look for. I look for the recovery that, again, as I said earlier, I'm looking for just the extension, the rotation of the elbows. And you see a lot of people who recover over the water, elbows are pointed downward, they tend to go down, they create drag. So I'm looking at, are you creating drag? If you're creating drag, you got to eliminate that. And if you're going downward on that stroke, you create drag between the fingertips and shoulders. So I look for that. I look at the head position, how it relates to your shoulders, and that it's kind of in line with your back. It's not forced one way or the other, but it's really kind of in line with the back. And your shoulders are driving the movement forward, not the head. You get a lot of kids doing the head thing, and that I don't like. I don't like hands coming out of the water. Even though I've had some kids who are kind of like that, I try to tone that down. I look at the kick a lot too, and I look at the relationship between the knees and the heels. And that kick has been, from when I was a kid, if you're much younger than I am, but the kick was up, out, and together. And now it's really kind of a straighter path. And interestingly, when Rebecca's kick, you look at her kick or you look at her pole, and you think, well, those things don't, she's just like a half skull and she's got a really brief abbreviated kick. How does she go fast? And somebody I met at a clinic one time characterized Rebecca as the hummingbird of breaststroke swimming, because it doesn't make any sense. But that's where you look at the elbow position. If the elbows are down, she's probably not going to be as good. She's got her heels outside the knees, so even though it's abbreviated, it's still got that kind of positioning. One of the things I thought is really interesting in the years, as you recall, when you're doing camps and stuff like that, you videotape these age group kids who aren't very good. If you look at, in breaststroke in particular, you look at those levels of swimmers you have some videotapes of, from the very beginner to a junior national kid, a national kid to an Olympic athlete. What I look at it is that line. But one of the things I found really in stark contrast was what's going on with that kick between Kitajima, who I got the fortunate opportunity to coach into his retirement, is Kitajima. There's a downward deflection of that kick as you extend into it, but it gets in line. And Ketogema does that better than anybody. It's almost seamless. It just kind of goes here, and then it's lined up. Everybody used to talk about how he finishes with his toes together. So I looked at how he finished that line. If you look at Eric Chanteau, who I also got the opportunity to coach into retirement, I've done a lot of that. He was really good at that, but you could see a little bit of this jolt into that positioning. And then if you look at a junior national kid, you see a downward deflection and then a very dramatic kind of lift into this line. And then a beginner is down, 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 and maybe they come up. But you look at that, and it's like Ketogema was they talk about his heel speed and hand speed. It's like, look how he gets this alignment. And for a guy who can't be more than 5'7", if he's 150 pounds, I'd be surprised, and had some tremendous speed. But I think getting that line from through the legs, through the kick, his timing of his shoulders through his head into his recovery, lined everything up so quickly that he was more efficient with every stroke. And so it all comes down to, regardless of the stroke we're talking about, is the efficiency and understanding the efficiency of each stroke and how do you maximize that. And so that's kind of the things that I look for in the breaststroke. I look at the other thing is I look for the lower back, and is that flattening out, or is water caving in on top of it? And so you look at that, and so you kind of negotiate with an athlete, try to get that body position squared away, and then you create tremendous efficiency.
Wow, so much there. I want to ask about Adam Peaty in terms of that. Just how do you explain that? You talk about a Ketogema, and to me that was perfection at the time, and then all of a sudden an Adam Peaty comes along and blows this whole thing out of the water and drops 3 seconds in the 100 breast. It's like, what is he doing? Like he took this thing to a different level, and I can't even explain it. I'm like, I don't know what he's doing.
Yeah, well, to be honest with you, if you were to I have done this, and I don't know if it still plays out, but if you look at Rebecca Sonia's stroke and Adam Peaty's stroke, they're very similar. I think they're very similar. Right. Adam has a very abbreviated kick. It's just very quick. It's very direct. Breaststroke, it's like the backstroke pull has become very straight. It's not this old classical dig down deep, come up and finish low. It's more straight through. You look at Missy Franklin, Aaron Pearsall, it's more of a straight path through the stroke. I think the breaststroke kick has become more of a focus of being this position, but it's really just kind of straight back. I think Adam has a very abbreviated kick, and he kind of has just a really strong skull out in front, and he's able to maintain the tempo throughout that entire 100 that he swims, or the 50. He's not
power too.
Yeah, a lot of power, but I think that's the contrast. It would be interesting to look at the true dynamic between a Sony and a Peaty, because I always saw the similarities between the two strokes, that there's a really more of a skull versus a pull, and I teach a skull versus a type of a pulling action. And it's a very abbreviated kick, so he's very powerful. And I'm not sure if it holds water to the extent that how I compared those two, but that's kind of what I saw early on with Adam Peaty in his stroke compared to Rebecca Sonia's. That seemed different. But I think breaststroke's interesting because, again, what I love about breaststroke, the nuance is so individualized. Jacoby out of the U.S. Olympic team, she wins the Olympic gold medal, which is always the women's breaststroke. There's turnover breaststroke is so tremendous, and the fact that Rebecca won the Olympic 200 breaststroke two Olympics in a row was a feat, because that doesn't happen very often. But there's always, and Lydia's breaststroke is so different from Lily King's breaststroke, and very intriguing. Breaststroke is interesting.
And then you've got the 200 breaststroker from South Africa, who has completely different stroke with that late breath. I hadn't seen anything really like that before, with that extremely late breath that she's doing. Interesting stuff.